What's going on, guys? We're back. This is part two of the Grantham video with a Ukraine veteran talking about all things Ukraine combat. This is really, really cool. If you haven't watched part one, make sure you go watch part one first. It probably would make more sense, or you can be a weirdie and watch part two and then part one. But this is badass. Also, I recently have been talking with Mr. Michael, Mr. Grantham, and just blown away with the humility. Somebody who has this big of a following and media presence, almost 5 million subscribers. And I emailed this guy last week and he replied to me in like an hour. I was literally jaw dropped. I'm like, what? Like, this can't be real. I had to like verify this was the real guy, and it was, man. And since then, we've gone back and forth. We're gonna try to set up some cool collab stuff, also with the team leader of Athena. His name is Blue, who is also extremely cool guy, man. Been meeting some awesome people lately, so stay tuned. We got a ton of cool content coming up. Please like, share, subscribe. We're on the road to 50,000 subs. Let's help me get there. Help us get there as a community. Discord link in description. We have all of our the units that I recommend over there. We have our uncensored footage units for foreigners to come join if they're looking to fight. I have the ones I recommend over there. Uncensored footage, all kinds of cool shit, gaming stuff. Lastly, merch, hats, t-shirts, hoodies, all that shit. Link in description. If you do pick something up, thank you so much. First of all, second of all, take a picture and send it in the Discord because I want to see you wearing it. Super cool.
So we're inside the trench now. You're obviously going to get struck by drones while you're here. What are some just tips, tricks, things that you've learned from your time?
Yeah, I can't say it enough, covering concealment. And probably the second biggest thing is, it's not a shock that war is loud. And so most people are going to default to thinking they're going to have to wear ear pro, whether it's a pair of op scores, a pair of peltors, whatever. The fact of the matter is nobody really wears ear protection when they're operating on the front. Maybe under extreme circumstances, if you're a machine gunner or you're operating a GMG or you're a mortarman, I understand. But most guys that are doing any kind of forward work close to zero line are going to have their ear protection off.
Interesting. Why is that?
The reason is modern hearing protection, at least the stuff that we can use, is not great at picking up the frequency that drones emit. So where your ears are finer tuned for a higher pitch frequency, active hearing protection is trying to drum out that noise. And so there's a big detection difference between whether you have ear pro on or not. And that's probably the main reason, is being able to detect drones.
So when you would hear a drone, when you were told the
This is such a big point. Hold on, I want to let them finish.
drone was coming in, what was their standard procedure that you guys would do in the trench?
Yeah.
If you're able to speak to it.
Of course. If you are, there's a plethora of SOPs.
Okay, so hold on. Looks like they're moving on a little bit. This is so true about the ear pro, and we've talked about this so much. Sorry, guys. So I have the window open because we've had a ton of drones in the area today, so I can hear them better when the window's open, but then we got to hear fucking traffic. So we've talked a lot about active ear pro and drones, and in Ukraine, you see a lot of people doing this little number, right? The one on, one off thing. You see just completely off, and then you'll see people not run them at all. And people like me have lost multiple pairs in the field on an operation. People like Pastor, I know that he lost some a couple of times, and actually some awesome Ukrainian soldiers gave them their active ear pro when when Pastor was passing by their position, and many other examples. But the reason being is because you've always got your stuff on, your full kit, and when you're moving to position, inevitably there's going to be a drone, and you do one of these, and then later on you're like, okay, you pop the other one off, and then sooner or later you're running through branches, bushes, they pop off depending on what kind of brackets you have on your helmet and what kind of a rail system you have. And for whatever reason, man, I cannot find a decent rail system. I'll show you guys my kit that I have. It's nothing special. It's not like our boy over here. This guy's got an awesome setup. Mine was very minimalistic, but for whatever reason, at least mine and Pastor's and multiple other people's rail systems and stuff, they would just break off, and they're not really meant for the rugged running around the trees, diving into trenches and shit like that. They pop off inevitably. But unfortunately, what that leads to is, for an example that I have, a personal example is I have mine on like up like this, right? And we're moving through a trench. We're taking indirect enemy fire. We're moving, and the FPVs start coming in. And as the FPVs are coming in, I come into a bunker, and an FPV hit the wall next to me. So I didn't take any shrapnel or anything, but it was so close that the concussion, I didn't pass out, but it knocked me down. The guys had to grab me. They did a blood sweep on me. And if I had had my ears on when that thing hit, completely different story. It still would have sucked ass, but it wouldn't have shook my fucking, scrambled my brain as much as it did. And you see this time and time again, like right when you need them, on, it's a milliseconds that you have to look, right? Or before a gunfight, you're not going to prioritize throwing on your ear pro before you let loose with that fucking FN mini me, right? So,
but if you are, say, in a very, crappy, no offense, trench like you have here.
No, this is a crappy trench. I agree.
It's very open. You don't have a blindage. All you can really do is try and identify where the drone is. So if we have a drone flying exactly that direction at us, I'm going to try and find a wall that is against the drone and try and reduce my signature as much as possible.
Gotcha.
If you do have the luxury of having any kind of cover, a blindage, you have overhead covering in your trenches, or even an open part of your trench that has some vegetation growing it, you're gonna look for overhead cover, and that's probably the biggest thing that you need in Ukraine when it comes to cover and concealment is overhead, because that's where your threat is from drones.
Now, you were telling me earlier about you'd often put camo netting up, but you said that there's a very interesting counter to that was being used.
Yeah, so I've been in a good amount of trenches where they're resupplied with big camo tarps, and whether they're homemade from like NGO organizations or they're off-the-shelf camo netting, they get hung up, and within 24 hours the camo net's gone. And the reason is most of these camo nets are some kind of synthetic plastic material, and once they catch fire, they go. It's just like a wildfire. They burn super fast. I've seen Russian drones being used in a position that I was in, burning camo net with FPVs specifically made with big 1 liter water bottles underneath filled with gasoline. So essentially they impact your trench, and it flings fire everywhere, and it burns off all your cover and concealment.
Interesting. I think early, I would say maybe about 2 years ago, we saw a lot of those videos where they'd take those thermobaric grenades and they point them down. Was that the reason for doing that as well, is to burn out like cover concealment?
The thermite grenades,
vegetation, etc.
Yeah, I've had experience with thermite being used as well. It's very good against the biggest piece of armor of a trench, which is going to be logs, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of FPVs.
Hold on, I want to say, man, cami netting, any kind of netting over a trench, in between, like if you've got overhead cover in a trench, and then you put cami netting every or some kind of netting every handful of meters or yards, it has saved my life probably more than any other single item or invention in Ukraine. These simple pieces of camo netting, because they will, when a drone's coming in, they will catch on that netting if you have it set up properly, and oftentimes it'll cause the FPV to explode. Boom. But that's okay, because you'll run up and you'll hook up another net, right? And we've seen this happen multiple times where we'll go through 3-4 nets because the FPVs just keep coming in, and it'll just be a battle of attrition. But typically what you'll see is the enemy drone teams are like, okay, we can't waste another fucking drone on one of these nets, man. We're going to get our asses chewed out by our commander or whatever. So they'll give up on your position, at least for the time being, and then, hey, you won for the next hour. Or they'll send a fucking cab your direction and just melt your entire vicinity.
Say you have a very well built blindage, which is a 2 meter deep hole. Over the hole is big logs, but over the logs, what we do to cover them, to hide them, to cover and conceal them, is backfill it with dirt.
Yeah.
So it just looks like there's level, and you'll even throw grass and foliage over it.
Yeah,
so it
naturalize the terrain.
Exactly. So what?
Sear days.
So what teams will do, actually, it's very smart, is they will hit the tops of these blindages once they identify them with standard explosive drones to blow away the dirt and expose the wood. And once they expose the wood, they send a drone with thermite on it. They drop the thermite right on the wood. It burns straight through it like it's paper.
War is hell.
It is hell.
So we've talked a lot about trenches, dealing with the drones. I think the big question everybody wants to know is, at some point or another, you're gonna have to go, you have to recon, you're gonna have to get ammunition. Can we talk about leaving the trench, movement techniques, and what you've seen?
What do we talk about on this channel all the time? Spacing, man. There were times during movements where we had almost half a kilometer, actually sometimes more than that, in between moving elements, in between either a duo or just individual personnel on a patrol or moving to a position.
At this point, you need to exit the trench, because if I understand, supplies are not just dropped right to you, they're dropped behind lines, and you have to be able to get to them.
Correct, yeah. Nothing is rarely, just like the personnel themselves, you're never infilled to position. Infills are always going to be a mix of mounted and dismounted, and that's the same with logistical stuff too. Whether it's logs being dropped off for reinforcement, or it's ammunition, Starlink, you name it, everything is going to be anywhere between, 1, 2, 3, 4 kilometers, etc. back. You're going to have to leave your trench system and go fetch it and bring it back.
If I'm not mistaken, the first time you infilled in, you had a pretty stark reminder of what the war was like the very first experience, if you're able to share that.
Yeah. It wasn't necessarily my first infill, but it was my first infill in a new AO, an AO that was much more complicated and harsh than the previous AO that I worked in. We're going through big mud fields. It's very muddy and deep and mucky out there. And so there was a final maybe 500-meter stretch of open terrain before our final tree line where we were going to dismount and then do our dismounted infill. And as we're steaming through out of this tree line and now into this open field, there's a few specks out in the distance kind of moving around, running around like ants. And as we got closer, I was able to identify that these are Ukrainian soldiers as part of a motorcycle assault team, and all of their bikes were stuck in the mud. You're talking about knee-deep, waist-height deep mud, tank tracks. It's just a mess. And so imagine trying to ride a tiny little dirt bike through that.
Ain't happening.
For them, obviously, it didn't go very well, and all of their bikes were all the way up to the engine and gas tank in mud and completely leaned over, and they're fighting for their lives trying to pull them out of the mud. As we drive by, I'm watching them struggle, and as we're about, maybe 20 seconds out from our tree line, an FPV comes in and just takes 3 of them out. And the fourth guy, part of that team, just ditches the bike and runs.
Stark reminder.
War is hell.
So, exiting the trench, dangerous. So, tell us what we're looking for.
Yeah, so in this scenario, if we're leaving a trench that is very outside.
Hey, for future reference, if you ever in a similar position, you get your vehicle stuck in this terrible, god-awful mud that Eastern Europe is able to create, leave it. It's going to be hard enough to move on. It will be difficult to move on foot, but you're not going to pull that fucking machine out of that mud, man. You could barely pull yourself out of that mud.
Of cover and concealment, you don't have a tree line that is running alongside or through the trench system to provide overhead. There's not a lot you can do, but there's still some general SOPs that you can follow. The first being, have your personal camouflage on. Personal protection is very important. Wearing your armor, wearing soft armor and stuff like this. I would say arguably, any kind of camouflaging gear that you have is arguably just as important in this conflict, because like I said, if you avoid detection, you avoid any kind of threat really, unless it's some indirect fire. And so really you want to focus on cover and concealment. You're looking around, you understand the route that you have. Say if we need to move exactly this way from the trench opening to go retrieve a dropped bunch of goods, whether it's ammunition, fuel for a generator, you name it, I'm going to be looking for the route and looking at a map and seeing where there's thick foliage that I can move through, what I can do to minimize my exposedness to the sky.
A little bit of route planning before leaving.
Exactly. And a good rule of thumb during route planning, especially when you have tree lines, is sky. You want to find a route where you see the sky as little as possible. Because if you can see the sky, then what's in the sky can see you.
What do you say? Do not trust the sky?
Do not trust the sky. Yeah.
Great
Now,
advice.
so we're gonna start exiting, but what concerns do you have beyond the sky that that you should be looking for on the ground?
Yeah, a big thing in Ukraine, it's pretty much everywhere across the Eastern Front, is ordnance. Whether it is unexploded ordnance from mortars, artillery, a drone that lost signal and didn't detonate and is laying outside your trench, as well as the more obvious answer, which is landmines. You have small anti-personnel landmines like the very famous PFM-1 or butterfly, toe popper, you know, it has a million names. You also have, we've seen recently bouncing Bettys come into employment. Those are being used more now. And so any kind of ordnance, you're always going to be kind of looking down for. And so
I'm tracking that they're actually dropping those from Mavics behind your lines. So even with a forward line, there really is no safety at any point.
yes, and this also comes into factoration in route planning, right? Because once you plan a route, typically that route doesn't exist for another 24 hours thereafter that.
Yeah.
Because you may do a reconnaissance of a route, and I've done this multiple times where you go out on a small fire team mission to do some reconnaissance and look for kind of a way to get your troops into a position for an assault, right? And so you spend all this time going out onto position, taking a risk, going through this minefield, going through this aerial threat, and you hear back 2 days later that after you have been detected moving through that sector, Russian mines, whether it be Russian drones, whether it be Mavics carrying butterfly mines, whether it be heavy dropper drones like the Baby Yaga or Vampire style drones, big multi-rotor drones carrying a big plethora of butterfly mines spreading up to 100 at a time over an AO. And this could be very, very complicated because you can walk a route 20 times and the 21st time it'll have ordnance on it that you didn't see before. And you're 2 or 3 kilometers away from any enemy personnel. And it's the fact of the matter is Ukraine just becomes an entire minefield. So you have to treat leaving the trench as if it's your first time ever leaving the trench. Like I said, even if you've done the route 20 times before, that 21st time, you'll find new things because stuff is constantly dropped from the air.
Perfect.
Dude, this guy's dropping bangers. Such good advice.
Show us what it's like.
Yeah, let's do it. As I'm moving outside of the trench, I'm gonna be looking at the ground. And it's a very confusing thing because, the air is so scary in Ukraine. It's a terrible thing. There's drones everywhere. The ground is just as dangerous,
down,
right?
up, down,
and
up,
so
down.
I'm constantly scanning. And it kind of changes the way a patrol is typically done because, you're taught, especially in like range or file scenarios, you are kind of at ready, looking forward, maybe scanning the ground. Whereas in Ukraine, it's a much bigger priority to constantly be scanning the ground. Very famous in my memory personally is one of my good friends as well as teammate lost a foot in one of our AOs just because there was a drone threat. He decided to run and not look at the ground. And what does he do? He takes about 5 steps through a route and steps on a PFM-1. Keep in mind, this route was previously clear of any ordnance and it had been dropped the day prior before we did any assault work. So you're always, a big emphasis is looking at the ground, looking at the ground, looking at the ground, looking at the ground, looking at the sky. Other than that, all you can really do is look for cover. This is a very scary example of where movement would be taking place. So in an instance like this, we're gonna kind of blur the lines between SOPs and kind of just keeping ourselves safe by really increasing our movement tempo. So if we were ever subjected to a very vast open space like this, of course I'm gonna be thinking about looking at the ground, looking for mines, looking for places to cover. If there is no places to cover, like I'm standing in a very big open field, which this does happen, or a section of your tree line has been taken down, whatever, I'm gonna be running.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be running, and I'm gonna be assuming the risk of stepping on a mine to get away from, an inherently larger threat, which is the sky. And so, really,
it's so counterintuitive, and he's hitting it right on the head, right? You got to move quick, but you can't move too quick. You got to look at the ground, but you also got to look at the sky. You also got to look dead ahead in case there are enemy positions, depending on where you're heading, in case they're dug in and just waiting for you to walk up on them. There is there's no perfect way to do any of this. There's no way to cover all the bases. The best way, and we've talked about this in previous videos, but the best way is just to have a very, very solid, all around foundation of soldiering, of infantry, and you being able to pull these different tools out of your tool belt when you need them. You're scanning 5, 10, 15 meters, you go to the sky, boom, boom. All right, you're back down 5, 10, 15 meters, boom, left, right, you're back in the sky. And again, like he said, and if you got to move quick and you start hearing that scream of an FPV, dude, you are not looking at the ground for mines, bro. The last thing you're worried about is what you're stepping on. You are jumping, you are hauling ass, right? And something I ran into in this last AO over summer was, I mentioned this in this video or last video, there's so much fiber optic cable that looks exactly like a tripwire that the Russians will set up and the Ukrainians will set up. That'll have, some kind of a booby trap or frag grenade or something connected to it. So you're running through all of these wires. You have no idea if any of these are actual tripwires or if it's just another fiber optic FPV cable. Nightmare, dude.
Running is your only defense in something like this. If I'm in a more wooded area like a tree line, I'm gonna be looking for cover. I'm gonna be always staying by the stumps of trees. I'm gonna use you as a stump of a tree here.
Yep. Actually, we can move over to the tree line now.
Yeah, we can do that.
Let's do that. Okay, we are now in a little bit more overhead cover, so you can better show perhaps some of the techniques.
Yeah, and as I was stating to you just a few minutes ago, a lot of the SOPs that are used, you would think is common sense. But of course, with the fog of war, with stress, with being on the battlefield to a unknown enemy, you forget a lot of these things. A lot of these things slip your mind. And so, the most notable is what I'm doing right now, which is a huge issue. Because if you look directly above me, open sky. And anywhere that is open, that a drone can see you, is a problem. And so, in most cases, because as we talked about earlier, coverage is quite stark in some tree lines. You're gonna be looking for concealment where you can. You're gonna kind of take what you got, kind of thing. And so in an instance like this, I'm gonna just make a brutal obvious assumption that I probably shouldn't be standing under a direct open sky. And so just moving to somewhere like this, underneath a tree, is a good option. And like I said, it's kind of take what you get, right? And so you can't have it all. You can't. This isn't war is not this perfect world scenario. And Ukraine is a shining example of that. And so I'm breaking a big rule here by being bunched up with my teammate. And it's an issue, but as we stated before, cover and concealment is a priority. And so if you have to kind of blur the lines in some areas, like being bunched up to ensure that concealment is achieved, and your signature is as small as possible, it's the sacrifices that you have to make.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's not an infinite amount of cover, like he's saying. Where they're at right now is a pretty nice location because it looks relatively dense. But if you've only got one of these types of tree, this isn't even like a real big tree, but this type of a tree that he's behind, you've only got one of these every 30 meters or so, and you're starting to hear a dropper drone like a Mavic or a Baba Yaga or an FPV come in. You want to get up under there, and like he said, you're taking the risk that you're too close to him and that drone already saw you, and now you're both going to get schwacked. Or that you just made it in time, the drone doesn't see you at all, passes over, you're good, you continue your movement. And there's little factors like that that are happening hundreds of times during a movement in Ukraine. Little factors that could completely change the entire direction of your mission, right? Did he see you or not? If not, cool. Operations green light, you're still go. Did he see you? Okay, he dropped a grenade. Okay, your buddy just took a piece of shrapnel to the leg. It hit an artery. He's bleeding out. Tourniquet, boom, you got to get him out. Okay, while you were getting him out, another dropper drone dropped another one. 2 of your other guys got hit. Dude, it can change like that. And you're going through hundreds of these scenarios trying to get them all right? Because if you fuck up too many of these, it can turn into one of these disaster situations.
Well, should we do a little bit of movement and show them what that will look like when we call a halt and go into cover?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it.
drone.
Great example right here, guys. This cameraman is what, 10 meters away, and you could barely see Michael right here in this. I call him Michael now because we talk on Instagram. We're basically homies. You could barely see him over here, right, right here. So if you could barely see him on this extremely high quality camera that he's using to film, imagine a pixelated Mavic that's 200 feet up in the air with a a little gimbal camera or something. It's harder to see. Um, yeah. Oops. I will say, thank God drones don't have ears yet. They can't hear you, because you do it to be the safest as possible. And Pastor and I had a very good example of this in my last mission last summer. We were going through some of the most dense vegetation, foresty area that I've ever been through in Ukraine, and it is so loud, dude. Like it was straight up like you see in the movies in the Amazon where you got your machete and you're chopping through and shit. It was like that, and it was so loud that if there was any enemy anywhere nearby that could hear you, you were fucked. But it was also by far the safest route for concealment from drones. And at that time, the number one priority was staying concealed from drones. So we took that route. But if they could hear, if they had some kind of audio sensor where they could hover down over the forested area and then hear us, dude, they would have been like, oh, they're right there, because we're just like crashing through rocks and trees. And
After moving to that tree line, you can kind of see how you got to work with what you've got, right?
Yep.
And breaks in formation, spacing issues, bunching up, it's all normal, it happens. And I'd like though to highlight one of the things that is a big issue with a lot of the new guys is when you call a drone hold, when somebody sees more often, they hear it before, and you stop the formation. What you're trying to do when you stop a formation is not necessarily become invisible to the drone. You're trying to take advantage of the drone's weakness, which is it's 400 feet above you. And so when it's looking down at you, they're not necessarily looking for a guy walking through the trees. They're looking for movement in the tree line. They're looking for silhouettes. They're looking for shadows, things changing. And so
I just want to point out, sorry for keep pausing. Look how they're both breathing heavy, right? And that was after what we saw was probably like a 30-meter movement through this really dense vegetation. That shit takes it out of you, dude. Like, you will be so gassed. And then when you're the most gassed that you've ever been from going through this shit is typically when, that drone will be like, and then come see you. And now you're like, now you got to move. So you got to pull it from the reserves, right? So fitness, important.
Stopping the formation to hide or take cover from a drone is not about necessarily disappearing. It's about just holding still. And the biggest mistake that I see people do, that I was guilty of in the beginning, was when somebody calls a drone, you look up at the drone. And what you're doing, although you may think you're acquiring a target or you're looking for the threat, is very detrimental, because what you're doing is you're showing a bright white face to the drone. In a bunch of foliage and things that's green, brown, you're looking up and there's a big set of white eyes looking up at the drone. It's very easy to see. And so the best thing you can do, if you do have a Viper hood, which you should, is have your hood on. Somebody calls a drone hold, and you just try and reduce your signature. So tuck your gun up, bend down, and just listen.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's probably the best thing that you can do to just avoid detection, is really just try and pretend like you're not there. Because if you move, if you're panicking, if you're trying to cover yourself with foliage, this is stuff that I've all seen. Ultimately, you get seen not because of what you look like or the appearance that you have on the battlefield. It's because of the movement that you're of your signature. You're moving around, you're causing shadows to change, and that's what gets you seen. So the biggest thing being, don't look up at the drone, just remain still, hold until further instruction is given. Most likely your team leader or whoever's leading your patrol, or the person that spotted the drone in the beginning, will remain looking at the drone, spotting the drone, and that means nobody else in the formation has to do the same thing. Everybody just needs to focus on hiding and staying covered.
Awesome. So really good information there. So from here, we're going to be notionally in the forest, just so you can see his movement techniques as we follow this little path up. He'll be showing you how he moves, what he's looking for with his feet as he's walking, and we'll be speaking to spacing so much as you can make it happen. Obviously, things get a little funky sometimes, but we'll see how it looks. So please, sir, after you.
So as we continue to move through a tree line, as we stated earlier, I'm not necessarily looking forward. If I understand where my threat is, say if I'm moving between friendly positions, I'm not necessarily focused primarily on a threat in front of me. Although still important, I'm more so prioritizing up and down. Down meaning ordnance, up meaning drones. So as I'm patrolling, I'm looking down and scanning up. Looking down, scanning up. And a very, very, very important thing to do when moving through any kind of environment is periodically taking a break, holding your squadron, holding your patrol, taking your ear protection off, and listening.
Stop, look, listen, smell.
Exactly. I mean, SILS is ever important, especially in an environment where you hear a lot of leaves crunching, sticks breaking, people talking behind you. You forget that tiny, tiny little buzz of a drone hovering above you. And so it's been many times first-handed where I've stopped, taken a look at my patrol, looked back, take my ear pro off, and sure enough, there is a tiny little buzz coming from the sky. And you look, and sure enough, there's like a Mavic sitting a few hundred meters away, just watching you. And you get up, you begin to move again, and what does it do? It just slides over. There's a Mavic over there. You can hear it, like 300-400 meters that way somewhere, just hovering. It's probably watching us. It's one of those things. It's not a if, it's when. Like I said, the battlefield is so plagued with surveillance and aerial ISR that there is really no way out. You will get seen. You will get attacked via kamikaze or FPV drones. You will get dropped on via drone droppers, and you will be watched. For sure, 100% you will be watched at some point during your operation. The first thing you're gonna do, once you acknowledge the drone, you never panic. They've seen you. Running around, running away is only gonna exhaust you. And so what you really need to do is focus, understand that there is some kind of threat. And whether you don't know what this threat is, which can be panic inducing, it could be confusing because you don't know whether this drone pilot is on the phone with a mortar team, on the phone with an FPV team, or if there's actually no active heavy weapons or artillery or anything, and they're simply performing ISR. And so you don't want to panic, you don't want to freak out and run around and make a bunch of movement. You need to just keep your composure, remain camouflaged, and maybe change your route a bit.
Yeah.
So I see that I'm kind of in the open here. I can maybe stand up. I'm gonna keep my patrol held. I'm gonna look for a new route. Once I identify something, formally bring them up and begin movement again. And what you're gonna try and do is look and find the best spot to possibly get away from this drone, because you have to keep in mind that the drone sees you now, it knows the direction that you're moving, it's gonna be there. It's not gonna go away unless you can shoot it down. It's not gonna go away. So the biggest thing to keep in mind is these ISR drones like DJI Mavics, they can fly for roughly 20 to 40 minutes. And you're gonna be on the shorter side of that because they've already commuted the 10 kilometers 5 kilometers to the front line. And so you have to think in your head, okay, I understand this drone can probably only stay airborne for maybe another 20, 30 minutes. So my job for the next 20 and 30 minutes until that drone goes away, and you will see them fly away, you'll hear them leave, is I need to prioritize moving to a place where it just makes it hard for the drone to see me. And so moving into a terrain like this, down here, you can see how I stick out against the background. You know, I look like a soldier, but if I move into an environment like this, it's much harder to see me. And again, if I practice what we were talking about earlier and reduce my silhouette as much as possible here, I have my hood on and I turn down, it becomes much harder to detect. And that's the drone mitigation and being seen by ISR. You know, the mitigation is not getting away. It's kind of making do with what you have and just practicing SOPs to remain as hidden as possible. You also have to keep in mind that a big point of a Mavic is to call in enemy fire. So if you are on a team, a direct action team, and you're moving through a tree line and a Mavic sees you, what do? They radio another drone team, a kamikaze team. And you have to keep in mind these cameras on these kamikaze drones are much, much, much worse. It is a very grainy, very low resolution footage, typically under 1080p. It's very, very low. You have to keep in mind, maybe the Mavic sees you, but that FPV that's gonna be coming over the tree line in maybe about 5-10 minutes, it's gonna have a harder time finding you as long as you practice those SOPs that we were talking about previously in the video, which is hiding as best you can.
Now, with the exception of mortars and some of those more common indirect fires that we know from big military days, when it comes to your FPV drones, and even your drones that are just dropping grenades, is it best to stay within a tree line to help mitigate that?
Yeah, you typically never move outside of the tree line unless things have really gone wrong.
Sure.
Off the top of my head, I was a part of 47 combat missions on the front. I had one instance where I left the tree line and ran down a road with my team. And the reason for that was because we were taking IDF and we were taking cluster.
Okay.
Shortly after the cluster started dropping, we understood that things were going very, very wrong on this exfil. We were seen. We were trying to move during the twilight hours, kind of the shift between, kind of that golden hour,
yeah,
the shift between, thermal cameras and
yep,
regular cameras.
That's a great time to travel.
Yes.
Actually, that's something to speak to.
Of course.
So as you go from nighttime to daytime, daytime to nighttime, that sunrise, sunset, it's that thermal crossover. It's a hard time for both cameras. It's a hard time for your daylight cameras. It's a hard time for your nighttime cameras, because for the nighttime cameras, like thermal imaging, everything is heated up. Trees are heated from the sun. Rocks are heated from the sun. Earth is unevenly heated. It's much harder to detect a human being during that time compared to like the dead of night when everything started to cool down a little bit more, although it's still a little bit cluttered. So that's what he's referring to, and it's a great time to travel.
Correct. And thank you for explaining that. That's kind of what we try and focus on is moving during these like thermal crossover periods. However, an issue with that is repeatability and a routine.
Sure.
It's very, very, very digressive to always move at the exact same time, because if your enemy is watching you and observing you, performing ISR on you, they understand that this is a repeatable thing. And if it happens over and over and over, if it happens 20 times, odds are you're probably going to exfil at that same time the 21st time. And so you always try and fluctuate.
This is so true. I saw this a lot when I was in the Legion 2023. It was so consistent that units would move at this thermal crossover time, always typically around the same routes, because the rest of it was mined to shit. So it was relatively safe. This was before drones were dropping mines directly into paths, after they've been cleared. So they were decent paths to take in and out. But what we would see is these mortar teams, artillery teams would just basically schedule, okay, it's 4:30 a.m., fire off. And they'd have these TRPs we talk about all the time, target reference points, where they've seen, 100 different rotations of infantry units. over in this crossroads, and now they just fire off every single time, the same time of day. And one of the reasons we knew they were watching, they knew our patterns. For one, it's not that difficult for us to assume that they know because it was pretty predictable. But for two, on days that there would be no infill or exfill on that road, they would still hit it the same exact spot, the exact same time. So they're not even watching, right? They're just assuming, okay, they're going to infill and exfill again. They're boom, 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 and launching off ordnance.
And kind of like I said, with this war, it's kind of making do with what you got and doing what you can and being flexible. And this instance where we ran outside of the tree line was because we decided to leave an hour earlier than thermal crossover, and it was still dark. And so we're under night vision, and if anybody's ever walked with night vision through a very, very densely compact tree line, it's not fun. It's very difficult. It's annoying. Your night vision's never focused on the right thing, and you're bumping into stuff. We started taking indirect fire. It started out with some smaller shells, and then it moved into cluster. And so we began to pick up the pace a little bit. And as we did that, we're snagging the rucksacks on more things. We're dropping stuff. We're losing pieces of kit in the tree line. And soon thereafter, we started taking SPG. And SPG is a terrifying thing because it flies so fast. Whereas, you can hear mortar and artillery coming. You can hear the incoming shots. And so you kind of know, if you're paying attention enough, you can hear the incoming mortars and you can begin to take cover. SPG doesn't really give you that time.
Boom, boom.
It flies much faster on a direct flight path. And so once we started getting hit with SPG, we kind of determined just in the moment that it was just time to go. It was just time to move as quickly as possible. And we made a judgment call and assumed a huge risk. We left the tree line and ran down the road as fast as possible. And like I said earlier, you're gonna have to kind of, just like bunching up with Mike here and when we're trying to hide from a drone, you're going to have to compromise a lot of your SOPs and kind of blur the lines between them and find middle ground. Because in that instance where I'm running full speed from SPG fire, I'm not focused on ordnance on the floor. I'm not focused on there's a thermal FPV above me. I'm just running and trying to get out of there.
Absolutely. It's definitely a very complex environment. So I suppose one of my last questions were, if we get into the tree line right up here, can you show us general things that you would do were you being targeted by an FPV or, say, a fiber optic drone? Maybe speak to that a bit.
Absolutely. I'll come back out of the tree line here.
You've been targeted.
Before we move on to this final part here, I just wanted to say what he said, spot on. I've had similar situations where we had to do the same thing. You pop out of the Posadka, is what they call the tree lines. You pop out and you just start moving down the pathway that's in Texas we would call it a feeder road. It's basically just roads on either side of the Posadka that's in the tree line that's in the middle. So you pop out and you just start moving, which it's just extremely dangerous. Like he said, you're wide open. There's most likely mines. It's bad news, but if you gotta move, you gotta move. What I wanted to say was, it's one thing if it's like that just happens once out of every 100 missions, right? It's like, damn, remember that one mission where we had to do that? And it was just a shit show. But hey, you got lucky. It is what it is. And then the rest of your missions are much more SOP based, much more structured. But so many missions are just like this because of it's just the sheer danger that you're constantly in. And as an infantryman, that you, like he said, you have to blur the lines of these SOPs. So, you blur enough lines and you break enough SOPs, you're going to get caught eventually. And it's just the amount of frequency that those types of missions happen is that's what makes it so scary.
Targeted by FPVs,
The combat
you're
here.
already in the forest. What is your go-to as far as mitigating that, making sure that they either can't get to you or to protect yourself more?
Right. So, you've kind of found yourself up Schitt's Creek, right? You have been detected, and now you've been not only detected via ISR, you've been detected via an attack drone, a strike drone, an FPV, or even a dropper. And so it's kind of it's a series of hard questions you have to ask yourself. Is it escapable? And the only real way that you can answer is if it's escapable is if you have a visual of the drone, if you see what kind of drone it is, or you can hear, because you can hear the subtle differences between like a kamikaze and a Mavic.
Yep.
Sure.
And you know, with a kamikaze, you have very little time to react. With a Mavic, say if a Mavic hovers, you know, 30, 40 meters above us and drops a grenade, unless it's a VOG, which is not as common anymore. If it's a standard, tongue released grenade, you're gonna hear that fuse pop.
Okay.
And so once you hear the fuse pop, you know, you figure you have 3.5 seconds to leave wherever you're standing and try and find some kind of shelter. When it comes to a dropper, the best thing you could do, like I said, counterintuitive SOPs, is if you can determine it's a dropper, keeping an eye on it and understanding where it is, because you could see the drop happen and you understand where it's falling, and you could run the other direction or try and seek shelter the best you can. When it comes to something that's faster moving, like a FPV, it's a hard thing to deal with.
Sure.
It's a very hard thing to deal with. I think we're all familiar with the kind of force multiplication that a drone has against a standard member of infantry. And so really the questions that I ask myself are not, how do I eliminate this threat, or how do I completely get away from this threat? It's, how can I give myself the best chance of survival against a superior firepower? And so I'm going to adjust my vision here and start looking for things like tree trunks, rocks, natural formations that you can, kind of hide behind, just like earlier in the trench where we kind of took cover behind that berm, the wall of the trench. It's the same kind of logic. You're trying to compact yourself and hide, because really the threat that you're facing is not necessarily blast damage, it's shrapnel. And so you're trying to get behind things that could potentially stop or slow the travel of this shrapnel to mitigate injury, or like prevent you from becoming a casualty, essentially.
Gotcha.
And so I'm going to be looking for things like tree trunks or thick vegetation like we have here, or a rock, or even something like getting behind down in this forest here that's really tight and has a lot of hanging sticks.
Sure.
To try and get as far away from a potential blast, because I can think that an FPV is here, it can easily fit through the gap that we're talking about here to the sky.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's going to have a hard time getting through this tiny little, a circle of trees that we have around here. And so, something like this, as small, as insignificant as it is, this single thing can save your life against the drone.
Sure.
And so thinking about the terrain and just understanding that, you're kind of in a bad position and you just need to think about minimizing and reducing risk. And, kind of going back to cover and concealment, it's getting concealment, it's getting cover, it's wedging yourself into a tiny little nook and cranny of a tree. It's something of the sorts.
Well, awesome. I mean, no matter what, it sounds like you're always having to break some rule in order to survive. It sounds like it's always kind of weighing every option that you have.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we've gone over a lot at this point, so I figure what we could do now is we could go ahead and wrap this up, give our final thoughts and stuff. Any further kind of little tips and tricks? Ultimately, this is just going to be a primer for these guys, but we can't thank you enough for coming out here. So let's head back and let's finish it up.
Sweet. Thank you, Mike.
So we've gotten here to the end. We've gone over a lot of information. It's been a huge information dump, a lot of videos, etc. So here at the end, is there any general information that you'd like to give to people? Any final tips and tricks before we kind of finish things out?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of, you can see a theme during this video is modularity and not being stuck in your ways. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons taught by this conflict, is that old practices from prior conflicts, some practices work, some are very detrimental. And so you can't be stuck in your ways. You have to be flexible. Cover and concealment, first and foremost, above pretty much everything else, is going to be your main priority. And just staying alert. Little tidbits like removing ear pro, practicing sills, stuff like this is the stuff that's going to save your life. It's not a very glorious war where you're kicking down doors and clearing rooms. You're really trying to survive most of your time out there on the front.
It is interesting that from war to war, things change, things go back to the same. We're seeing a lot of old techniques being resurfaced. We're seeing just a complete changeover. Just like there was such a change from Iraq to Afghanistan to Syria, just like you're going to see a change from Ukraine to whatever future war there is. But there's always going to be something to glean from every single conflict, because beyond that, the technology evolves, drones, then the tactics will evolve. So I can't thank you enough for coming out here and giving us a kind of a little taste of how things are and how things were for you. Obviously, this is a very short primer for you guys. This isn't going to replace training for you guys at all. This isn't going to replace experience, but at the very least, it can help you a little bit in your training regimens with your friends and be able to give you a little bit more information. Obviously, I got to give you a plug a little bit. All My Friends Hate Drones. Got a little IG page. You got to check it out. But that being said, we've gotten to the end here, guys. Thank you.
That's his shit. I didn't know that. I see that stuff all the time, or I see that all the time out here in Ukraine.
So much for watching. We always got great things. And I guess the final thing that we have is what we always do, give a little bit of life advice. So outside of war, where's a little bit of life advice you'd like to give to our audience?
You know, we'll use this outside of
dad advice.
we'll use this outside of war, and also inside war as well. Just like we talked about in this video, is you know, always be able to be flexible. You know, never be stuck in your ways, because you know, failure to assimilate, failure to you know, acclimate to any kind of environment is going to be a failure. Whether that's in your personal life, whether that's working, whether you're a guy behind an office, behind a desk at an office job, or you're on the front trying to survive drones. Never be too comfortable in your own ways, and never be too ignorant to adapt to those ways.
Love it, man. Thank you so much.
Well said.
Guys, stay tuned for great stuff. As always, you got to check out the Patreon. We have all the best stuff out there. And if you're looking for a little bit of lighter fare, we do play some fun video games, so you don't have to focus on all the doom and gloom of being struck by a drone and blown up. And we'll have a good time, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Tons more great things coming.
Yes, man, love it. This is gonna be one of our longest videos to date, but dude, this information is gold. And I know I have a smaller channel here on YouTube, obviously, but our demographic, we have a very specific demographic on this channel, and there's a lot of people who come here specifically for this kind of information: how to survive in Ukraine, how to get to Ukraine, what units to join, what are the best tactics, tips, and tricks. So this was just fucking gold, dude. This is awesome. So huge shout out to Mr. Mike again. I can call him Mike because we're best friends now. And Mr. All My Friends Hate Drones. I don't know who that is. I don't think we've ever met, but super interested in talking with him at some point, if or anybody knows who that is and can put me in touch. Discord and Instagram links are below. You guys, I love you. Please stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.